Deja vu is that strange, fleeting feeling that you've already lived through a moment before. We've all felt it. Most people brush it off as a brain glitch or a coincidence. But sometimes it feels wrong, like reality is repeating itself in ways it shouldn't. These are four supposedly true stories of deja vu that didn't just fade away. They spiraled into something terrifying. I don't usually talk about this because of how crazy it sounds, but something happened to me back in 2017 that made me question not just my sanity, but the nature of reality itself. At the time, I was living in a pretty run-down apartment complex in central New Jersey. It was a three-story brick building that probably hadn't been updated since the late '80s. The kind of place where the hallway lights buzzed faintly and every door had chipped paint and mismatched locks. I lived there with my roommate Nick, who worked night security at a warehouse just outside of town. Most nights, I had the place to myself. One Thursday night in early February, I came home later than usual. As I walked up the stairs, I was hit with a smell I hadn't encountered in years, burnt rubber mixed with some kind of citrus cleaner. That smell triggered something in me, this sudden memory that felt like it didn't even belong to me. As I walked down the hallway, the deja vu hit me like a sledgehammer. Not just a flash of familiarity, but an overwhelming sense that I had lived this exact moment before in precise granular detail. I stopped about 5 feet from my door and froze. I knew exactly what was about to happen. The light above me would flicker twice. A woman downstairs would yell something muffled and then laugh. And at the far end of the hall, something heavy would fall. A dull, metallic thud. And it all happened in that exact order, exactly as I knew it would. I just stood there, not even scared yet, just confused. I thought maybe I had dreamed it. But then it happened again the next night. I was sitting on the couch, eating leftover Chinese food, when suddenly I knew what was about to play on the TV before it happened. The lines of dialogue, the background sounds, even the exact timing of a phone buzz from my nightstand. Over the next 5 days, these moments became more frequent. I started writing them down, testing myself, and every time I was right. I knew things I couldn't have possibly known, like the exact moment Nick would text me, or when a neighbor's dog would start barking. But these weren't memories. They felt more like reminders of something I hadn't lived yet. That's when the dream started. I dreamed I was lying in bed when the door opened. Nick walked in, pale and drenched in sweat, and said, "There's someone in the building?" His voice sounded wrong, too flat, almost like it was being played from a recording. I asked who it was, and he just stared at me. That dream replayed every night. But the final night, it wasn't a dream. At 3:12 a.m., my door opened, and Nick was standing there, saying the exact same words. I followed him into the hallway with a baseball bat in hand. He pointed toward the stairwell. No one was there, but something felt wrong. The shadows didn't move the way they should have. We ended up calling the police. They found nothing. I told Nick about the dreams, and he just stared at me before saying, "I've been having them too." Neither of us spoke another word about it. The deja vu ended that night, but ever since then, I'll sometimes catch the flicker of something, a memory, a sound, a sense, and I wonder if I'm about to remember something before it happens again. Because if that door opens again and I hear those words, I don't know if I'll be able to follow this time. I've started to wonder if what we think of as memory is really just our brain accessing timelines stacked on top of each other like layers of old wallpaper, each one faintly bleeding into the next. Sometimes I think that hallway was some kind of weak point, a seam between two versions of reality. I moved out 6 months after that night. I've driven past the building more than once, and every time I swear I feel a pull like something inside me wants to stop and go back in. Part of me still believes there's something waiting at the end of that hallway. Not a person, not a ghost, just a decision I haven't made in this version of my life. And every time I think about it, I feel like I'm closer to making it. In 2020, during one of those weird in-between phases of lockdowns and reopened stores, I went through a stretch of time that felt less like reality and more like I was stuck inside some scripted loop I couldn't escape. I was driving home late from my girlfriend's place around 1:30 in the morning. It had just snowed. Not a lot, but enough to make the road slick. I live in a small town outside Scranton, Pennsylvania, and there's this one intersection near my house that's notorious for accidents. 4 stop signs, no lights, and on snowy nights, you basically have to guess whether the other driver is going to stop. As I rolled up to the intersection, this heavy feeling settled in my chest. It wasn't fear exactly, just this strange sense that I didn't belong in the moment, like I'd already lived through it. I slowed down, even though I technically had the right of way. Then, out of nowhere, a black pickup came flying through the stop sign on my left. If I hadn't braked early, it would have smashed right into me. I pulled over shaking and just watched the tail lights disappear into the snow. That crash would have killed me. I knew it. But what scared me more was that I knew it was coming. Not in the sense of anticipating danger. I mean, I remembered it. I remembered the crunch of metal, the glass shattering, the airbag slamming into my face. None of it actually happened, but I remembered it like it had. I told myself it was just stress, the pandemic, the isolation, whatever. But a few nights later, it happened again. I was sitting at a red light when I remembered the next song that was going to play on the radio, and then it did. I remembered a woman walking her dog across the street, even though she hadn't appeared yet. I started to feel like I wasn't living in the present anymore, just replaying it. Then the dreams started. Always the same road, the same crash. Every night it got more vivid. In one of them, I stepped out of the car and saw myself slumped over in the driver's seat, eyes glazed, a long gash running across my temple. I could hear my own ragged breathing. On the 5th night, I woke up drenched in sweat and promised myself I wouldn't take that route again. I went 10 minutes out of the way and took the highway instead. Later that day, a friend messaged me. There had been a fatal accident at that same intersection at the exact time I usually drove through it. Same make and color of my car, a different driver, but the same ending. Ever since then, I've wondered, was I remembering my own death in another timeline? Did some version of me get rerouted at the last second? Or was I just the lucky one while another version of me didn't make it? I haven't had déjà vu that strong since. But sometimes, when I'm driving at night and the road feels too familiar, I get chills. Like some part of me remembers something I'm not supposed to. Later, I started reading about near-death experiences and people described the same thing. Memories of moments that hadn't happened yet, always tied to some brush with death. Maybe déjà vu is just a side effect of slipping through the cracks. Maybe time isn't a straight line at all, but a loop constantly resetting, and sometimes something inside us remembers what happened before the reset. If that's true, then every time we dodge disaster, it's not just luck. It's because we've already lived through it, and some part of us is trying desperately to stop it from happening again. Before I worked in IT, I spent 2 years doing overnight shifts at a long-term care home in upstate New York. It was an old building, a little rundown, but decent enough. We had a few residents with Alzheimer's or advanced dementia, but most were stable, just elderly and in need of care. There was one woman named Miss Adelaide. She was 87, mostly lucid, very sweet, and kept to herself. On her nightstand, she had a faded photo of a young boy she called her grandson, though no one ever visited her. Over the first few months, I settled into a routine, midnight rounds, patient checks every hour. Most nights were uneventful, but every so often I'd find Miss Adelaide awake, staring at the ceiling, humming this slow, haunting tune. One night, around 2:15 a.m., I found her sitting up in bed, her eyes wide open. When I asked if she needed anything, she said without blinking, "You already asked me that. You ask every night. But tonight is different. I felt this strange pit in my stomach, like she was reciting lines from a script of my future. I laughed nervously and offered her water. She refused and added, "You should remember this part." I told my supervisor, but they brushed it off as confusion or a sleep talk. The next night, though, she gave me the same response, word for word. On the third night, she was gone, passed in her sleep around 1:50 a.m. When I went to her room for rounds, the bed was already made and her belongings were boxed up. I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. I started digging through old records and archived notes. Turns out another night staff member had reported similar things in her file years earlier. Always late at night, around 2 a.m., she'd repeat phrases, predict specific actions, even once said the name of a new nurse before they introduced themselves. One entry from 2013 recorded her saying, "I remember this version. You take your break at 3:07. You always do." According to the note, the nurse had checked their watch. It was 3:07. I don't know what was going on with Miss Adelaide. I don't really believe in the paranormal, but it felt like she was trapped in some kind of loop or glitch, like she was forced to watch her life play out over and over, waiting for it to end differently. Now, I work behind a desk, but I still get the occasional wave of déjà vu, and when I do, I pause and pay attention, because maybe it's not just a brain trick. Maybe it's a message. Maybe it's Miss Adelaide or someone like her reaching across timelines trying to warn us we've been here before, and it didn't end well. Since then, I've met other people who worked at that same care home years apart. And without me saying a word, they told me they used to have strange dreams at night while working there. One even said a patient warned her she'd be fired soon, and a week later, she was let go due to downsizing. She didn't remember the patient's name. I just nodded and said how interesting that was. I think about Miss Adelaide often, and sometimes, when I'm drifting off to sleep, I hear that same eerie humming in my dreams. I can't help but think of her all the time.